Would I be the a-hole if I wanted nothing to do with my wife and child? Advice needed. My 35M, wife, 32F, and I have been together for 8 years. As with any couple, we've had our ups and downs, but we are a generally happy couple and we love each other a lot. We've spoken about having children many times, and I was always very clear about the context in which I would be comfortable having children. I always envisioned myself having children with my wife, but I was also as open as I could possibly be about one specific thing. If she gets pregnant, I would want genetic testing done, and I would want an abortion to happen if the test showed severe problems like Down syndrome. I told my wife this was a deal breaker before we got married, going so far as to say several times in the past that refusing these terms would be a divorce. I just honestly don't want to be a parent to a child with a severe cognitive disability if I can help it. I've seen many people in my life raise children with severe developmental delays. It seems extremely difficult. A handful of them have expressed regret about having the children directly to me, and I don't imagine I would handle it well personally. Of course, if our child happens to develop an issue after birth, that's another story. I would understand that that's the hand I'd been dealt, and I would be more than willing to do what I could to raise the child in as happy/healthy an environment possible. But if we can test for it and have an abortion, then that is 100% what I would want to happen, and that is the only term I had when agreeing to have children. She agreed to this throughout every time it came up. She seemingly always understood where I was coming from, agreeing to this boundary fully. Since she always agreed, it seemed natural to start trying for kids once we were ready financially. We started trying for kids, and she got pregnant. So we arranged for testing when she hit around 2 months. We got the results back and, as you can imagine, the child would end up with Down syndrome if we brought it to term. My wife and I were very upset about this as we were really looking forward to having our first child. But I mentioned we would need to schedule an abortion. She said she wanted to keep it. It has been 2 months now, and after more arguments than I could have imagined, she is not budging, and I'm at a loss as to what to do. I love my wife with my whole heart, but I also feel somewhat betrayed. I was very proactive in communicating the fact that this was a hard boundary for me, and I would, under no circumstances, want to have a child with Down syndrome or something like it if I could avoid it. Nor would I have married her or agreed to have children with her if she did not agree with this, which she did, until she got pregnant. I'm now heavily leaning towards getting a divorce and arranging for child support if she goes through with the pregnancy. I've communicated this to my wife, to which she cried and said I'm a piece of shit for saying that. Before I finish, let me head off what I imagine will be some things I've already thought about that people might bring up. 1. No, I don't think all people with genetic disorders should be aborted. Abortion is a family planning decision, and for my personal family planning, this is the decision I've come to. 2. I understand that many people have children with disabilities who go on to have fulfilling parenthood experiences. Thinking about myself and my personality, that probably won't be me. 3. What would you just abandon your wife/child if they got into any serious medical problem? No, I just prefer to avoid those situations if possible, and in this case, my wife agreed to it until she got pregnant, and only then changed her mind, thus the problem. 4. I understand how being faced with the actual pregnancy could lead to a change in her perspective, but I don't feel the same. I've thought as deeply as I can about this, and I feel broken up about it. Thoughts? Next story. Am I the a-hole for calling out my father-in-law for manipulating my mom into hating me after I refused to let them use my car for a Vegas trip? So, I, 28F, have always had a good relationship with my mom. But recently, my brother, 30M, and his wife, father-in-law, 29F, decided they wanted to take a road trip to Vegas and asked if they could borrow my car. For context, my brother has a bit of a track record of borrowing things and returning them in terrible shape, like when he once borrowed my laptop and returned it with a cracked screen, claiming it must have been there before. I depend on my car to get to work, so I wasn't comfortable handing it over for a week-long party trip, so I politely said no. That's when things got weird. Within days, my mom, who usually respects my boundaries, started giving me the cold shoulder. When I confronted her, she went off about how family is supposed to sacrifice for each other, how I'm selfish for refusing, and how my brother and father-in-law just want a break. Turns out, father-in-law has been feeding her story after story about how ungrateful I am, saying I care more about a car than family. According to her, this trip is a last chance for her and my brother to reconnect, and I'm apparently single-handedly ruining their marriage. Things escalated when my father-in-law started calling me names in family group chats, labeling me selfish and greedy, claiming I didn't know how to share. Now my mom believes her father-in-law over me, saying I'm cold-hearted and I don't value family unity. My father-in-law even brought up times I disappointed my family, like the time I refused to lend my brother money, he never paid it back, and I needed it for bills. I told my mom I felt manipulated, and she completely flipped, saying she never thought she'd raise someone so unkind. I was shocked. My mom is usually the one to see through things like this, but my father-in-law has completely turned her against me. Father-in-law is now talking about family values and how everyone else in the family thinks I'm in the wrong. It feels like my father-in-law is trying to push me out, and my mom is taking her side. It's exhausting, and I'm starting to wonder if I'm actually in the wrong for not just giving in and lending them the car. Am I the a-hole for standing my ground and calling out my father-in-law's manipulation, even if it's causing a family divide? Or should I have just handed over my car to avoid all this drama? Next story. Am I the a-hole for refusing to pay for my son's wedding after discovering he's excluding his stepbrother from the guest list? Advice needed. I, 52M, have 2 sons, Alex, 28M, my biological son from my first marriage, and Jake, 26M, my stepson from my wife's previous relationship. I married my current wife, 48F, when the boys were teenagers. We blended our families the best we could, but Alex and Jake never really bonded. They were civil, but there was always tension, mostly from Alex, who felt like I was replacing him when I remarried. Over the years, I've tried to treat them equally. I paid for both of their college tuitions, helped them with their first cars, and supported them in their endeavors. I've always seen Jake as my own son, and my wife has done the same with Alex. We've done everything possible to blend our family, even though we knew the boys would never be best friends. Fast forward to now, Alex is engaged and planning a big wedding. He asked me months ago if I could contribute financially, and I happily agreed, setting aside a significant amount of money to cover most of the costs. We've been having regular planning meetings, and everything seemed to be going smoothly until last week when I noticed Jake's name was missing from the guest list. When I asked Alex about it, he shrugged and said, "I just don't want him there." I was shocked and asked for an explanation, but Alex wouldn't give me one. He simply said it was his wedding, and he didn't feel obligated to invite anyone he didn't want there. I told Alex that Jake was part of the family and that not inviting him would create unnecessary drama. Alex was adamant, saying they were never close, and he didn't want to fake it on his big day. He said he'd rather have a smaller, more intimate event without any awkwardness, and I could either accept it or not. I told Alex that I wasn't comfortable funding a wedding where one of my sons was deliberately excluded without any clear reason. He got defensive and said it wasn't fair for me to hold the money over his head as a form of control. He accused me of never putting him first and always favoring Jake, which I found completely unfair considering everything I've done for him. My wife is devastated. She feels like this is Alex's way of punishing us for marrying and blending our families. Jake, on the other hand, is trying to stay out of it, but I can tell he's hurt. He's acting like it doesn't bother him, but I know it does. He's never caused any problems and has always been respectful of Alex's space. Alex's fiancée called me and tried to mediate, saying that weddings are stressful and that Alex is just feeling overwhelmed. She begged me not to pull the funding, as they'd already booked venues and vendors with the expectation of my support. She said she understood how I felt but also reminded me that this was Alex's day, not a family reunion. Now Alex is barely speaking to me, and my extended family is split. Some think I'm justified for standing up for Jake, while others think I'm overstepping and should just let Alex have his day the way he wants it. I'm torn. I don't want to damage my relationship with Alex, but I also feel like this is a slap in the face to Jake and our entire family. Am I the a-hole for refusing to pay for the wedding if Alex insists on excluding his stepbrother? Next story. Am I the a-hole for marrying a man who proposed to me while I was on the toilet? Advice needed. It's not as bad as it sounds. My friends are just obsessed with that part, I think. Fake names. My 32F fiancé Peter, 30M, had arranged a candlelight dinner in a hotel room. There were flowers, rose petals, and music. There was my favorite dinner and my favorite dessert. Peter was in a tuxedo. I was wearing a dress. That evening was so amazing. While I was eating, my IBS started acting up. I ran to the bathroom. It was mortifying, but at least I was comfortable enough with Peter to allow him to come in. I apologized for ruining our evening while I was on the toilet, and he said it was okay. I felt like he wanted to ask me to marry him the whole evening. I told him I love him, and he said I love you too. I told him, I'm sure you'll take care of me in sickness and in health. That comment made Peter smile, and he got down on one knee. I didn't care that this was the situation. I was so happy to say yes. I felt like he wouldn't have asked that evening if I hadn't said the in sickness and in health comment. I told my best friend Kate, 33F, and another friend Bailey, 33F. I told them the truth. Kate said it's weird, creepy, and an a-hole move on his part. I explained that he likely would have put it off if I didn't mean the health comment. Kate said I was desperate, and that I should have some respect for myself. Bailey said, if I thought Peter would ask another time, then I should have let him ask another time. Before talking to them, I thought I had the sweetest proposal story. Now I feel like an a-hole who caused my amazing fiancé to have a terrible story. Am I the a-hole?